Imagine waking up one day and realizing that the voice you've always called yourself, the running commentary inside your skull, the private narrator who justifies your decisions and explains your moods, might not actually belong to you. You open your eyes and the ceiling above you feels alien, the edges of objects sharp and almost unreal. There is a pause, a disquieting silence between your thoughts. In that silence, a question rises. Who is thinking this thought? Is it your soul, or merely the echo of your upbringing, your culture, your neurology? You swing your legs off the bed. The floor is cold. It is the same morning as every other morning, but a fissure has opened in your certainty. You notice how automatic everything feels, the brushing of teeth, the checking of notifications, the mild dread of responsibilities waiting just beyond your door. For years you've moved through life believing you were steering the ship. But what if you were only a passenger, your hands placed on a wheel already turning? The paradox stares back at you from the mirror. A body pulsing with life, a mind bustling with thoughts, yet no clear boundary between you and everything that shaped you. You wear a name, but you didn't choose it. You hold beliefs, but most were planted before you could question them. Even your tastes, your favorite colors, your hungers, your fears, feel like a collage assembled by invisible hands. If that's true, then what is the I that you defend so fiercely? Is there an essence deeper than reason, or is the soul just another story reason tells itself? The more you contemplate it, the more unsettling it becomes. Perhaps what you call your soul, that intimate sense of being, emerged long before you were capable of thinking. Perhaps reason arrived later, like a guest in a house already built. Yet society trains you to reverse the order, to imagine that you are first and foremost. Remost a rational agent, a sovereign mind capable of shaping destiny. If that is a lie, then everything from morality to meaning may be standing on sand. You step outside. The world feels crowded with other lives, each person convinced of their uniqueness, each lost in private narratives. The bus driver, the student scrolling on a phone, the elderly woman feeding pigeons, every one of them believes, as you once did, in a coherent self. But what if all of you are actors reading scripts written by forces unseen, biology, culture, memory, unconscious drives? This realization presses against your chest like a weight. You want to run from it, but the question stays. If the self I know is a mask, who or what is wearing it? Could there be something behind reason, something older and more silent, the thing philosophers once called the soul? And if so, how do you find it beneath the noise? You don't yet have the answers, only the trembling recognition that the ground beneath your life may not be solid. And in that trembling, a doorway opens, not to despair, but to a deeper exploration. Because if you are not simply the sum of your conditioning, then perhaps something within you is free. Perhaps by looking directly at this paradox, by daring to hold your gaze on the unknown, you may discover the truest part of yourself. The first time you sense the mask slipping, it feels like a glitch. But soon you start to see it everywhere. Every decision, every preference you once thought was yours now shows its ancestry, an advertising campaign you saw as a child, a parental command spoken in a tone you couldn't refuse, a trauma buried so deeply you barely remember it. The problem isn't just that you've been influenced. The problem is that you've mistaken the sum of those influences for yourself. Carl Jung once warned that, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. In that single sentence, he revealed the silent puppeteer behind the curtain. The unconscious, your inherited instincts, your repressed fears, your shadow, writes most of your script. You step onto the stage believing you are improvising, but the lines were rehearsed long before you spoke them. Friedrich Nietzsche, too, felt the tension between soul and reason. He mocked the last man, the comfortable citizen who imagines he's free, because he can choose between small pleasures while avoiding the terrifying responsibility of self-creation. For Nietzsche, reason without soul produces only complacency, a life of mild entertainments and shallow opinions, anesthetizing you from your own depths. You become an echo chamber for borrowed ideas, never daring to confront the raw material of your being. Arthur Schopenhauer went even further, describing the will, a blind, ceaseless striving beneath consciousness that compels every living thing. He argued that our intellect, what we call reason, is merely the servant of this will, endlessly inventing justifications for impulses already decided. In his bleak but clarifying view, the soul is not a tranquil sanctuary, but the restless core of existence itself. Reason builds a story around this core, making it palatable, but the engine underneath is far from rational. Modern psychology has corroborated much of this ancient suspicion. Cognitive scientists have shown how decisions are made milliseconds before we're aware of them. Neurology has revealed that the brain's default mode network continually constructs a sense of self by stitching together memories, predictions, and sensations, a fiction so convincing you almost never see through it. Even your gut feelings may be predictions your nervous system has rehearsed thousands of times. All of this means that the self you defend may not be a stable entity, but a process, a stream, and yet we build entire societies on the fiction of rational, self-directing individu. Also, we teach children to find themselves, as though there were a hidden statue under the marble waiting to be uncovered. But what if the marble never hides a statue? Only more marble? This is the hidden problem. You are living in a world that rewards personas, not essences. Your culture demands you craft an identity, Instagram profiles, resumes, opinions on every trending topic, while secretly shaping the very tools you use to construct it. You become an artisan of your own mask, mistaking craftsmanship for authenticity, and in doing so, you grow ever more distant from the quiet mystery that preceded both mask and craftsman. But the mask has cracks. The tension you feel, the subtle exhaustion, the unshakable sense that something essential is missing, is the soul's signal flare. It's the part of you that refuses to be entirely colonized by reason or society. It's what Viktor Frankl called the will to meaning, the drive not just to survive or succeed, but to live truthfully. You can ignore it, drown it in distractions, or explain it away, but it persists like a low hum beneath every moment of quiet. You are standing at the threshold of that hum now. If you keep walking, you may begin to see not only how this hidden force shapes you, but how it shapes entire civilizations. And once you see that, you can no longer pretend to be asleep. Once you start noticing the mask, it's impossible to unsee. You look around at the world and realize how many of its structures depend on people not asking the question you're now asking. Entire economies thrive on the assumption that identity is stable and desires are self-chosen. Marketing campaigns don't merely sell products, they sculpt selves. News feeds don't just inform, they polarize and reward predictable reactions. Each choice you make is registered, profiled, and used to nudge you further into a pre-mapped corridor of behavior. In this light, freedom starts to look like a stage set. You can walk anywhere you like, as long as it's within the walls already built for you. The menu of options is wide enough to feel infinite, yet narrow enough to keep you predictable. This is the psychological version of Plato's cave. You believe you're roaming a vast world, but your steps are circumscribed by unseen walls of conditioning. On the personal level, the consequences seep into every crevice of your life. The relationships you choose are influenced by attachment patterns formed before you could speak. The careers you pursue reflect both inherited ambitions and inherited fears. Even your definition of happiness, your private image of a good life, is more often a hand-me-down than a revelation. You end up chasing what you're supposed to want, then feeling inexplicably hollow when you finally get it. Cognitive biases reinforce the trap. Confirmation bias makes you seek information that validates your preloaded narrative. The availability heuristic exaggerates recent impressions and media spectacles. The fundamental attribution error convinces you that other people are acting out of character flaws while you're merely responding to circumstance. These biases aren't just quirks of thinking, they're structural supports for the mask, keeping you from questioning its reality. Neurologically, the situation is even more sobering. The brain rewards predictability with dopamine. It punishes uncertainty with stress hormones. This makes breaking out of the corridor psychologically painful. Even if the corridor leads nowhere, like a rat pressing a lever for pellets, you keep returning to familiar loops because they feel safer than confronting the vastness of the unknown. The soul's quiet signal flare, the sense that something is off, can be drowned out by 1,000 small hits of digital novelty or routine comfort. And because this dynamic operates collectively, the trap becomes culture. Societies build institutions, ideology, and technologies that mirror their hidden assumptions. Schools teach conformity under the banner of education. Workplaces reward busyness over depth. Social networks engineer a constant performance of identity. Without noticing, we pass these norms to the next generation, who will call them just the way things are. The cost of all this is subtle but immense, a creeping alienation from yourself. When you mistake the mask for your essence, every triumph feels strangely hollow. Success becomes a performance review. Relationships become transactions. Even spirituality can become a brand, a curated aesthetic of meaning that never risks real transformation. Yet the very discomfort you feel, the restlessness, the suspicion that there's more, is evidence that the soul has not disappeared. It's proof of an uncolonized space within you, an ember that hasn't gone out. If you could trace that ember back to its source, you might find the doorway to something freer than either the mask or the corridor. But such a journey is not without cost. It requires a rebellion, not against society alone, but against the comfortable habits of your own mind. That rebellion, if you dare to attempt it, begins with a simple but radical act: to stop believing every story your reason tells about who you are. The first act of rebellion is not dramatic. It isn't quitting your job, renouncing all possessions, or retreating to a mountain cave. It is a pause, a deliberate interruption in the automatic stream of your life. In that pause, you stop letting thoughts pass through you unquestioned. You notice them as events, like weather crossing the sky of your mind. You begin to see that the voice narrating your life is not identical with the one who listens. This is the crack where freedom enters. As soon as you recognize a thought as a thought, not as truth, you create space between reason and soul. The mask trembles. It can't fully attach itself to something it can't fully possess. The philosopher Epictetus called this the discipline of assent, refusing to give immediate agreement to every impression that appears. Jung called it shadow work, confronting the parts of yourself you've hidden or denied. Different languages for the same insurgency, the act of taking back authorship of your inner life. History is filled with examples of people who sensed this and walked off the stage of their culture's script. Siddhartha, leaving his palace. Socrates refusing to escape Athens. Simone Weil abandoning the privileges of academia to work in a factory. None of these acts were simply renunciations, they were investigations. Each was an experiment in discovering what remains when identity built by society is stripped away. For you, the path may not be as dramatic. The rebellion begins in micro-moments. Closing the app instead of scrolling, breathing before reacting, asking, "Is this desire mine?" before chasing it. You might start writing your thoughts each morning, or sitting in silence for 10 minutes at night, or deliberately stepping into an unfamiliar environment where your usual identity doesn't hold. These practices aren't rituals for their own sake. They're training in disobedience to the mask. It's also crucial to question the stories you've inherited about success and worth. Nietzsche urged the creation of new values, not because old values are bad, but because inherited values keep you docile. If you find yourself exhausted by the pursuit of goals that don't satisfy you, ask what deeper hunger is being ignored. Viktor Frankl's work with concentration camp survivors revealed that those who endured had found a meaning that transcended immediate circumstances. They had discovered a why that could bear almost any how. Your rebellion is not just against manipulation, it's for the discovery of your why. This shift in perspective is counterintuitive because it doesn't offer instant clarity. At first, it may feel like losing yourself. That our old identities crumble, familiar pleasures feel dull, conversations seem scripted. But this loss is actually the unmasking. Like a snake shedding its skin, you're not disappearing, you're revealing. The soul does not arrive with fanfare, it emerges quietly when you stop covering it. Gradually, a new kind of agency appears. Decisions feel less like reflexes and more like responses. You begin to sense a still point behind your thoughts, a presence that observes without judging. Reason is no longer the master inventing excuses, but a tool serving a deeper orientation. You realize that freedom isn't the ability to do whatever you want, it's the ability to see where your wants come from and choose which ones to cultivate. This is rebellion not as destruction, but as creation. You're not rejecting society or reason, but reclaiming your relationship to them. The mask becomes transparent. The corridor dissolves into open space. You glimpse for the first time the possibility of a self not built but discovered, a self born from the meeting of soul and reason rather than the domination of one over the other. And this glimpse leads to the final, most powerful realization, the one that can transform not just how you act, but how you are. There comes a moment in every honest rebellion when you realize you've been seeking something that was never lost. The pauses, the questioning, the stripping away, they don't create the soul, they simply reveal it. The silent presence behind your thoughts is not a blank void, but a luminous field of awareness in which every thought, memory, and sensation arises. You mistake this field for a self because it feels intimate, but in truth, it's larger than any identity you've worn. In that recognition, a quiet astonishment begins. The paradox you started with, who am I? Is it my soul or my reason? Doesn't resolve by giving one side victory. It resolves by dissolving the false conflict. Soul and reason are not enemies. They are different languages spoken by the same reality. Reason is the soul's capacity to make patterns. Soul is reason's capacity to feel meaning. Each without the other is incomplete. Together, they form the living pulse of what you are. You begin to see that every moment, even the most mundane, is an expression of this pulse. The way sunlight strikes a wall, the sound of traffic, the smell of your coffee, all of it is happening in and as the same awareness that wonders who you are. There's no longer a strict boundary between you and the world. The observer and the observed turn out to be woven from the same fabric. This is why, when you stop clinging to your manufactured identity, life doesn't collapse into chaos, but opens into intimacy. From this vantage, freedom stops looking like escape and starts looking like participation. You don't have to flee society or reject reason. You don't even have to find yourself in some exotic way. You simply act from the still point you've discovered. Choices arise, but they are no longer compulsions. Desires appear, but they are seen before they are obeyed. Relationships continue, but they're infused with a deeper honesty because you're no longer playing a part you've mistaken for your essence. This realization also changes how you see others. The bus driver, the student scrolling, the elderly woman feeding pigeons, each of them is also more than their mask. Each carries the same silent presence, the same capacity for freedom. When you understand this, compassion ceases to be an effort. It becomes a natural response to seeing yourself in another form. You begin to sense what philosophers and mystics meant by universal mind or shared being. The shift isn't about becoming perfect or enlightened. You will still have habits, moods, and biases. The difference is that you no longer collapse into them. They pass through you like weather through the sky. The soul remains the sky itself, unchanged by passing storms, while reason becomes the art of navigating them. In this way, even suffering acquires a new meaning. Instead of proof that something is wrong with you, it becomes a signal, a teacher pointing you back to the still point. And perhaps this is the ultimate truth. You were never merely the mask, and you were never merely the observer. You are the meeting place where awareness becomes a person, where timelessness enters time. The soul isn't a ghost hidden inside the machine of reason. It is the dimension of depth within everything you've ever experienced. To live from that realization is not to withdraw from life, but to inhabit it fully. Work, love, conflict, creation, without forgetting the vastness from which it arises. It's to walk through the world as someone who has remembered something essential, that freedom isn't out there, waiting to be earned. It's here, in the seeing, now. And in this recognition, the question that once haunted you, who am I, turns into a living answer, not a definition, but a way of being, not a sentence, but a presence, a life lived from the depth where soul and reason are no longer separate, but one,